Present day. Present time.
Greetings. Welcome, Earthlings, to another unbelievably exciting episode of Bonzo on MMA. We are at UFC Fight Night, Vera versus Cruz, coming out of San Diego in... I'm not even going to try and pronounce that, because that's a stupid name. But how many fights do we have on this card? 13 fights on this card. We had 10 fights on our last card. As you can see now in the bottom right next to me, is how I've been doing. As a reminder, at UFC 277, I went 9-4, got 4 fights wrong, including the main event. For last week, UFC Fight Night Vegas 59, I got 9 right, 1 wrong. But 2 of those fights got canceled. 3 of those fights got canceled. 2 of them got rescheduled for this week, and we're going to talk about one of those in the second bout. But for the first bout, what we're going to talk about is Youssef Zalal and Damon, I believe, is Blackshear. I believe his name is Damon Blackshear. Zalal's coming off of 3 losses in the UFC. Blackshear is making his UFC debut. This is a near even fight. It's at 135, so you know that both guys are going to be technically very good. I believe that this is Zalal's first fight at 135. He's a featherweight fighter, if I'm not mistaken. Zalal is also going to be a little bit more aggressive, I think, in his approach for this fight. If I'm not mistaken, he's coming off of a couple of losses. Whereas Blackshear is making his debut, so those kind of jitters might be there for him, especially considering this isn't an Apex card. This is in front of a live crowd, and I'm assuming that in San Diego at 1 o'clock, there might be some people there. Given it's a toss-up, though, and given that Zalal is in desperate need of a win, I think that might play in his favor, and I think he might get the win here. Moving right along to fight number 2, we have Jason Witt and Josh Quinlan. As a reminder, this fight was scheduled to go on last week, but it got pushed back because Quinlan actually popped for steroids. That being said, the steroids that he popped for, from my understanding, were picograms, and it's the reason why this fight was rescheduled for this week. That being said, Jason Witt came in heavy for this fight. He did not make the weight of 175, I believe. Is what it was. Sorry, no, I believe it's 175. Let me see what it was. 175, correct. Yep. And so he came in at 179 and a half. So Jason Witt did come in heavy for this fight. So, I guess it's a total toss-up now, sorry, I shouldn't say it's a toss-up. I should say it's rather even in regards to both of these guys not really... I think this is not a good look for Quinlan, having popped so young in his career for steroids. I don't think it's good for Jason Witt to be, in his career and not making weight. That being said, he made weight last week and then he popped, and so the fight didn't happen. So yes, you can make the argument that it's not fair for him to have cut weight twice for a guy that did pop. But again, to be blunt, it's your job to make weight. It didn't even seem like he tried to make 175, and so this fight's happening at 180. That being said, I still think Quinlan wins this one. I think it's still going to end the same way. I don't think either guy is going to lose their purse over this or lose any part of their purse over this. So, yeah, there's that to look forward to. I was a little bit hyped and excited to see Josh Quinlan, but after the steroid pop, not so much. Even if it is picograms, it still means that he used. Even if it is out of competition or out of any sort of conceivable way that would give him an advantage, he was using it at a time where he could have gained an advantage from it. So it is what it is. Moving right along, we have Ode Osbourne versus Tyson Nam. Ode Osbourne's coming off of a really beautiful stoppage victory last month at Volkov versus Rosensteig. Nam is the much older fighter here, and I think that's going to probably play a role in this fight too. It's an uphill battle for Nam, and he's the underdog here, so I really do see Osbourne winning this one. I think this one's going to be a little bit one-sided, even though Tyson Nam is very good. I think the age is going to play a factor here, and I just don't think he's going to be as strong or as fast as Osbourne. So I can see a finish here too. Gabriel Benítez versus, I'm going to not try to pronounce it, but Charlie. We'll just call him Charlie. Both of these guys are coming off of 2 losses. That being said, Gabriel Benítez is coming from the featherweight division. He used to fight at 145, and he was really struggling to make the 145 weight limit. He fights at AKA, and we know that those guys have always had weight limit and injury problems, so that might be playing a role here. 155 seems to be a division that he did not have problems making weight for. He looked good at 155, and again, that's the reason why I make these videos Friday night. Most of these other guys are making these videos on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. Why? You don't know what these guys are looking like to be making any sort of an adequate prediction. And I know you'll say, oh, but like you can make an adequate prediction without the weight cut. No, you can't. Because you have no idea what an individual is going to be like at a weight cut. And for most of these guys that come out of AKA, I'm sorry to say, but for a lot of them, when their weight cuts don't look good, it's a problem. Josh Koscheck spoke about it very openly. When he was at AKA, that was one of the big problems with that gym. Those guys train really hard and are unbelievably injury prone. And because of that, it makes those weight cuts unbelievably difficult. Khabib Nurmagomedov, who just made it into the Hall of Fame, is a perfect example. He also struggled with weight cuts to the extent that he almost retired early on in his career. I think he was like 2 or 3 bouts into his UFC career, and then he was having massive issues with his weight and with the weight cut, and he needed a nutritionist to really get things under control. Add that onto the nagging injuries he had from the gym. So, this is something to really watch in this fight. Him making the jump to lightweight, I think, is really going to play a massive factor in Gabriel Benitez's fight here. I think it's going to play in his favor, and I think that the added weight is going to really help him, and I think he can actually get the finish here. Moving on to Nina Nunes and Cynthia Calvillo. Both women are coming off of losses. Both women are desperate for a win here. Calvillo's like the slight favorite, and I kind of agree with that. There's not really much to talk about. I really see this one going the distance. I see it being really even, and similar to the first fight, I see it being a real toss-up with both women being really desperate for wins here. I see Cynthia Calvillo coming out on top, though, by decision. Luxaz Breski versus Martin Buday. This is the heavy boys. We got the heavyweights coming out to play. We also have a clash of 2 former Dana White Contender alumni in these 2 guys. Breski is coming in, the smaller fighter, I believe by almost 30 pounds or so. I believe that Buday came in at 266, so he came in a pound of the title fight limit. He's well within that since this isn't a title fight. But I expect that to play a really big factor here. Buday's a 10-1 fighter, as you can see. He's pretty strong, too. I don't think that this is going to be a walk in the park for our friend here, and I expect to finish for Buday here. Moving on to our main event of the prelims, we have one of my favorite fighters, Angela Hill, facing Lupita Godinez. Angela's coming in as the underdog for this fight. She's much older. She is coming off of a number of losses, some of which were controversial, and I don't think some people would agree with at all. And that's not me saying that as a fan. I think that most people who watch those fight would agree that Angela won. And so I think that that's kind of lit something under Angela, and she understands now that I can't be fighting for decisions anymore. I need to fight for finishes, and she's made that very clear during the interviews for this fight. She's not going for a decision win here. She's going to fight and die on her sword. So expect that for her. That being said, she's fighting Lupita, and she's no slouch. She might be coming in short notice, having fought 1 month ago as well. I still think that this is going to be a good win for her if she can get that win. It'll propel her in the strawweight division, the female strawweight division, and really help her to make a name for herself. I don't think, however, that she beats Angela Hill, though. I'm going to be honest. I'm hoping that Angela gets the win here, and I'm hoping she gets the finish. Going into our main card. Now, the main card's really interesting because we have a number of really interesting fights here. We have Gerald Meerschaert versus Bruno Silva to kick us off, and this is really an interesting fight, especially to kick off our main card. Meerschaert is a tough guy, and he accepts fights. No one's going to sit here and deny that. The guy has got a massive record within the UFC. He's fought for a long time. And it's because he doesn't, turn down fights. And that can be said against Bruno Silva. Gerald, we all know what happened to Gerald against Khamzat Chimaev. He got knocked out one punch. But again, that was a fight that he knew he probably wasn't going to win, but took it because no one else wanted to. And he knew that if he could survive, those early punches, maybe he could have won that fight. Because, again, we've seen Gilbert Burns made him look human. Bruno Silva, similar guy. He also takes those big fights. He fought Alex Pereira last, and we know that Alex Pereira is going to be fighting Israel Adesanya for the title at UFC 281. But what most people don't remember is that, Alex Pereira didn't knock out or finish Bruno Silva. That was a decision. He won in a decision, and it might have been a one-sided fight insofar as Bruno Silva did not look as good as Alex Pereira. But that being said, he still took him for the full 3 rounds. Sean Strickland couldn't do that. Some of these other guys can't do that. Israel Adesanya wasn't able to do that in the UFC. And while most people will point to the kickboxing record that Alex Pereira has and the fact that, yes, people have taken him to a decision within kickboxing, that's kickboxing. MMA is a completely different game. And I think that that's something that really needs to be understood. That being said, I think the skill level in terms of the competition both guys have faced really kind of plays a massive role here. Gerald Meerschaert has kind of shown that he doesn't really have what it takes to hang with some of the guys that are at the precipice of a title shot. I believe that Bruno Silva is one of those guys. I think that Bruno Silva gets a finish here. I think that victory kind of helps to push Bruno Silva towards that top 15. And I think that with maybe 2 or 3 more wins after the Gerald Meerschaert win, Bruno Silva sees himself in contention for a title shot. And I really do see Bruno Silva in that position, because I don't think that It's really weird because, again, Bruno Silva really just got unfortunate insofar as he fought Alex Pereira. He fought the guy who's fighting for the title next, right? And that was his last fight. So, when he's facing some of these, I hate to call them lesser competition, but when he is facing some of these guys that are more so towards the top of the outside looking in of the divisions, from maybe, I would argue, number 7 all the way up to number 15 and above, I think that Bruno just is better than those guys. I just do. And I think that Bruno has the ability to beat those guys. And so I really see him getting the finish here against Gerald Meerschaert. I see that propelling him right back into the direction he needs to be in. And I think, again, with 2 more wins after Gerald Meerschaert, I'm assuming he's going to want to fight again after a Gerald Meerschaert win. Probably going to look for that January card in Brazil. I know a lot of these guys, the Brazilians who are fighting on these cards, I know a lot of them are going to be gunning for that Brazil card in January. So I'm keeping my fingers crossed here for Bruno Silva. I think that Bruno Silva is going to win this one. I think it's going to be a finish, and I think he's going to try and get onto that Brazil card in January. Moving right along to Ariane Lipski and Priscilla Cachoeira. This fight was rescheduled because Ariane Lipski was not medically cleared to fight after her weight cut for last week. And because of that, instead of fighting at 125, they're going to be fighting at 135. Neither woman had trouble making that weight. And so expect a war in this one. Both women with the added weight should be a little bit slower, but should have a little bit extra power. I see Ariane Lipski still winning this one. Devin Clark versus Azamat Murzakanov. Murzakanov putting his O on the line. He's agile. He's got heavy hands. He's got knockout capabilities. The heavyweight division needs guys like this. Devin Clark has faced some of the best in the division. But, I mean, Murzakanov's the technically superior fighter, and I expect him to get the finisher. Sorry, and I'm not sure if I call this the heavyweight division. It's the light heavyweight division. These guys, the light heavyweights are it's a deep division, deep division. And there's a lot of these guys who are on the precipice looking in from some of these countries like Russia, Brazil, from Europe really, that can fight for the title, I think, and never really got a chance to face off against John, who's the best. But it is what it is. Sometimes you just miss your shot. They had 10 years to do it. And no one did it. Moving right along from that. Sorry if I didn't say it. It was Azamat Murzakanov going to win this fight. Should be a finish. Yazmin Jauregui versus Yazmin Luciano. I believe that both women are making their UFC debuts here, but the fantastic thing about this is that Jauregui is putting her O on the line, and both women are 5-0 in their last fight. They both have KOs and TKOs on that like list of last 5. As you can see, Yazmin's the number 1 ranked woman coming out of Latin America, so she has some absolutely fantastic hands, some great ground game from Luciano. I mean, she trains at Academia Fight House with Werner Jandiroba, so she's tough too. Both women are looking to make a statement in this fight, so expect them to be tough in it. Expect them to come out here with a lot of heart. Lucindo, her path to victory is through her Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. Jauregui, hers is through, her striking. So expect this to be that kind of a fight. I think that if Lucindo is able to take her down, she might have a better shot there. But I think that both women will probably try and strike first, and whoever gets the better of the striking is probably going to dictate the fight. If Lucindo is on the wrong end of a couple of those strikes, I think she's probably going to have a tougher time. And to be quite honest, I think she is. I think that Yazmin is gonna win this fight. I think she's gonna do what needs to be done and really make a statement in her win here. Moving on to our co-main event, we have David Onama versus Nate Landwehr. Nate was originally scheduled to face Tagir Ulanbekov last week, but because of the sanctions that are currently being placed by the U.S. government on Russia, there has been a number of increased difficulties for Russian fighters to get visas to not just the United States, but to a number of countries. This has been the case not just for Tagir, but for a number of other fighters as well. And this has been all but confirmed, not just by Ali Abdulaziz, who I know most people within the MMA community absolutely revile, but other people too, including promoters like Dana White, as well as other managers. So we totally understand why this fight was not rescheduled between those two and why it was moved to this position. The next time there really is an opportunity for Tagir to fight would be at UFC 280 in October in Abu Dhabi, or in any other card, or if any other kind of leeway is made before then for some of these kind of individuals who are not necessarily involved in any sort of political bullshit that is going on. Because to be blunt, what's happening not just to Tagir, but to a lot of Russians who may also have been trying to flee the country because of their political beliefs, they've been denied that opportunity. And I think that sanctions as a whole, and I know I'm going on a tangent here, does nothing to impact the governments of the country that is being sanctioned. But what it does do is it makes life difficult for the citizens of the country who in some instances are not guilty of any crime other than being from that country. We've seen this take place in a number of various countries around the world, and quite frankly, I in no way support any sort of sanction against any country, and I in no way, shape, or form especially support making life difficult for any athlete of any kind to try and go and compete in their field, whether it be mixed martial arts, whether it be tennis, whether it be baseball, whether it be golf, you name it. It doesn't matter. People, there should be no barriers to this bullshit, and that's exactly what's happened here. I'm sorry for my tangent because this is something that's really upsetting because, again, we're missing out on some good fights because of this, and that's not to take away from David Onama. He's the favorite in this fight against Nate. But again, people who know Nate know that he's a former M1 featherweight champion, and so there is a bit of a history between Nate and Tagir insofar as both of these guys have had an experience within Russia. So you'll see here is Zubaira, not Tagir, my apologies, it was Zubaira. Zubaira's again from Russia, has some experience, fought in AKA. My apologies, not Tagir, but I know Tagir Ulanbekov's also having problems with his visa, but Zubair from Khabib's team. Sorry, my apologies. He's also having issues as well. But like again, that just goes to my point, right? Is that it's not just one fighter that's having this issue. It's multiple fighters that are having this issue. It was Tagir earlier. Now it's Zubaira who's having this issue, and it's a number of these guys who are just not getting their issue because of political bullshit. But that's besides the point. Let's focus on the fight here of David Onama versus Nate Landwehr. David Onama steps up. And David Onama is coming off of some really fantastic wins here. He's everything on the feet. He's really fantastic on the ground. He's a really good fighter. But I think that experience plays a massive role here. Nate Landwehr is not just some no-name guy with a weird record in the UFC. He has a wealth of experience fighting a number of tough fights against some of the very best. I think that within the UFC, he's gotten a little bit unlucky insofar as he's eaten a flying knee as well as knees from the clinch. And I think one can make the argument that knees really are his enemy. But unless Onama catches him with something like a knee, a flying knee or something of the sort, I see Nate dictating this fight through his technical abilities and really being able to take the win here. So I have Nate winning this fight. And then finally, we have our main event, the fight that everyone I think is really the most excited for. Marlon Chito Vera versus Dominic Cruz. Main event time. I mean, like, what more can you want from a main event? We've got two fighters with really a clear path to the goal. Chito Vera, I would argue, is probably a win away from a title shot next. Dominic Cruz, being a former champion in the UFC and the WEC, is that fighter that will give him the W and the kind of push he needs to be viewed as a very real contender for the title. Cruz's footwork and experience is masterclass. He's one of the best in the bantamweight division, period. Not just currently, ever. We need to recognize that. Chito, I hope, recognizes that. But I think one of the things with Dominic that makes him so formidable is his game planning. And I know most people all have plans, and those plans don't necessarily always work out, but I feel that for Dominic, he's a rather clever individual, and I think that for his sake, he's going to really put one on to Chito in terms of having a plan. I think that he wouldn't have taken this fight if he didn't have one, and I think that his footwork is really going to trick Chito to start this fight off within those first 2 rounds. Chito, I would argue, is a bit of a different story insofar as he's become a fan favorite these past few years. You know, he's really stolen the hype from finishing Sean O'Malley and then front kicking Frankie Edgar's face. I think that's really pushed him forward. I know that for guys that used to watch Tough, they would remember him having fought on The Ultimate Fighter Latin America, and unfortunately, because of an injury there, he was forced out. And his story as well from that, he was fighting for his daughter to get her surgery that she needed for her rare disease. I mean, like, Chito's story is fantastic, fascinating, and if I were you, I would really look into it because it's one that's worth looking into. But what's also as interesting as his backstory is his fighting ability. He's been with the UFC since 2014, and he's been building a name for himself. As I mentioned, he's beaten guys like Sean O'Malley and Frankie Edgar, but he's also beaten guys like Brian Kelleher and Rob Font most recently. But that's also not to say that he hasn't had wars with guys like Song Yadong and even Jose Aldo, who's had a renaissance in this 135 division. I think, though, that Chito's on the right path and his strength and his technical ability is really a step above, and I think he's getting better. I think that the younger Chito's really going to put it on to Dominic within those later rounds. So from rounds 3, 4, and 5, I think Chito's going to really take over. I think he's going to use the first 2 rounds to really start to slow down Dominic. A lot of leg kicks and a lot of body shots to really eat up at Dominic. And then from there, he's going to really start to increase his output in rounds 3, 4, and 5. I think that Dominic's footwork and his technical skill in the jab is really going to help him in those earlier rounds to keep Cheeto at bay. But once Cheeto within the first and the second round starts to dirty wrestle and really get Dominic in the clinch, I think we're going to see those knees, those elbows, and a lot of that dirty boxing that Cheeto's known for to come out and to really start to slow down Dominic Cruz. I think that Cheeto gets the win here, and I think what's really interesting is going to be where Cheeto sees himself moving forward next. The title shot is his for the taking, as far as I'm concerned. And I think that the win over Dominic Cruz is going to really put him as the guy to face, in bantamweight. Because right now, we have really TJ up against Aljo. That's coming up next. I don't believe that, there's any other interesting fights for Cheeto after this, really. Merab is fighting Jose Aldo. Song Yadong is fighting Corey Sandhagen. And really, coming off of his losses that he's had against TJ and Petra for the interim title, I think Corey needs that win here, and it's not going to push him towards that title shot. But with Cheeto's a bit of that surging fighter, and I see him really moving towards that title shot next. I think if Merab gets the win here, I think he may have an opportunity to potentially fight Cheeto for a title shot. If Aldo wins, I think that sets up a rematch for that interim title shot. But I think that, for Cheeto, I think for him in particular, I think that, if he can get the win in a very spectacular fashion against against Dominic Cruz, I think he's going to really push himself towards that title shot next. And I think that's going to really push him there. But I mean, this division, 135's top 15 is utterly stacked. Utterly stacked. And I mean, look at the guys that are looking into this division too. We have Umar Nurmagomedov at 25. He's at 25. This guy's at 25. But then you also have guys like Rafael Assunção, Casey Kenny, Frankie Edgar, who's coming off of losses, and that's a different story. But you have Adrian Yanez, who's on the precipice of the top 15. You have Said Nurmagomedov. He's not related to Khabib like Umar, but again, another really good fighter. Sean O'Malley, who's fighting Peter Yan. Ricky Simon, who's an unbelievable fighter who had an amazing win against Jack Shore recently. Where's Jack? Jack was right here. Yeah, Jack Shore at 15. Taking that oath from him. You have Dominic Cruz, who's rounding up now the top 10. You have Rob Font. This is a stacked UFC division. Stacked from top to bottom. The top 25 is full of killers. These guys are not, walks in the park. Almost every one of these guys is a tough fight. Yeah, Sergio Pettis is there too. I mean, there are some tough guys at this fight, in this division. So, 135 is going to, this is a really interesting fight at 135. And again, I think that Cheeto's going to win it. And I think that I think it's going to propel him towards a title shot. But again, just looking at what's coming up next in that division with Merab fighting, Aldo next, I think both of those guys are going to make the argument that, hey, I should actually be fighting for the title next. Given that, Jan is fighting on the same card as Aljo, he might be talking shit about Aljo if Aljo is able to beat TJ. TJ coming back and getting the win against Corey Sandhagen after popping two and then getting the title shot, I think has a lot of people in the division upset as well. So this bantamweight division and this title fight has massive repercussions and massive implications. There's a number of people within the top 10 and really within the top 15 that can make the argument that hey, look, this is my division and screw anybody that argues with me because it's mine, and anybody that disagrees is up for a hell of a fight. But that being said, I've rambled on for about 28 minutes, and about 5 of those was for, bullshit sanctions. My apologies, but we'll quickly go over with a quick rundown of what we've got. Youssef Zalal beats Damon Blackshear. I have Josh Quinlan beating Jason Witt. Ode Osbourne beating Tyson Nam. Gabriel Benítez beating Charlie Ontiveros. Cynthia Calvillo beating Nina Nunes. Martin Buday beating Lucas Bresky. Angela Hill beating Lupita Godinez. Bruno Silva beating Gerald Mearshart. Ariane Lipski beating Priscilla Cochera. Devin Clark losing to Azamat Murzakanov. So Azamat Murzakanov beats Devin Clark. Yazmin Jauregui beats Yazmin Luciano. Sorry if I'm mispronouncing people's names. Nate Landwehr gets the upset victory against David Onama, but for anybody that's paying attention, Nate has always been good. And finally, I have Ode Vera beating Dominic Cruz in our main event. We start at 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. You better watch every fight because these fights are going to be good. As always, I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, like, subscribe, rate, leave a comment if you think that I'm wrong, don't know what I'm talking about, and all that. If you enjoyed, thanks. If not, it is what it is. Peace.